Atlanta News First presents First Alert Weather, Winter Weather Ready.
Happy holidays. Thank you so much for joining us for our First Alert Weather Winter Weather Ready special. We have the Southeast's largest team of meteorologists, and we issue first alerts and first alert weather days to keep you planned and prepared for any incoming weather that may be an impact on your day. A big part of that is winter weather here in Georgia. As you know, snow, ice can be very treacherous for us here in the Peach State, which is why it's so important that we forecast correctly. Not only that, we let you know if any winter weather is heading our way. Make sure you stay with us for this special. We have meteorologist Courtney Jacobazzi. She's going to see how we can prepare on the roads. Meteorologist Cutter Martin, he's going to take a trip to GDOT to see how they're preparing for any incoming winter weather this season. And then we're going to take a look back at 2022 and how things looked last year. And we're going to compare them to how we expect them to look this year. More importantly, we are going to give you that 2023-2024 winter weather forecast, because here's a little sneak peek. We are expecting higher chances of snow this year. So sit back, relax, grab a big cup of cocoa, and enjoy.
North Georgia is no stranger to severe weather, tornadoes, hailstorms, floods, and sometimes winter storms. All forms of winter weather can impact Georgia in any given winter season, but ice poses the greatest risk to North Georgians. What would you say a worst case winter weather event impact-wise for North Georgia?
I think worst case weather impact for North Georgia would be an icing event, a major icing event. Generally during icing events, what we see is the loss of power for extended periods of time.
It's what the Georgia Emergency Management Agency, or GEMA, and partner agencies plan for, potentially years ahead of any crippling impacts.
We don't wait for cold weather or ice or snow to arrive before we start preparing. We have plans that have been developed and tested over, many years, and every single year in the spring we do what's called a Winter X, a full-blown activation, and practice those skills that we need to make sure that we're responding to any sort of weather emergency.
Just as the First Alert Weather Team develops an action plan during winter weather, GEMA also begins a countdown, working tirelessly to keep Georgians safe.
About 72 hours out, at that point, we start assembling our decision makers and looking at the things that we need to do to be prepared.
Decision makers and their support staff will be moving into a different mode about the same time that winter weather watches are upgraded to warnings, and you start enacting your own plans.
36 hours out, at that point, we would potentially be activating, and then we're looking at other decisions that may need to be made. Is this something where a state of emergency may need to be declared?
As the first flakes begin to fall or the initial glaze of ice forms, people tasked with keeping you safe at GEMA's command center will be making their way down hurried halls.
We will already be here. We will already be in place. You'll have decisions that are being made as far as road closures, anything that the public would need to do in terms of steps that we can give them to make sure that they're prepared.
There are things that you can do to keep you and your family safe this winter season. Always stay in touch with the First Alert forecast. Develop a winter weather plan. For more information, visit AtlantaNewsFirst.com or check out the Atlanta News First app. Cutter Martin, Atlanta News First.
When we think about winter weather occurring here in North Georgia, it can make a lot of us excited. But when you think about what it can do to the roadways, I think that brings the opposite feeling. So we're going to talk about what creates that black ice on the roads that can be extremely dangerous when we talk about the threat of winter weather here in North Georgia. So how freezing rain occurs is you have warmer air in the mid to upper levels of the atmosphere. So as rain is falling, it is falling simply as rain. However, the temperatures at the surface are still freezing. So as that rain falls and makes contact with the roadways that again are still freezing, that rain freezes on contact, creating that thin layer of very dangerous ice that a lot of times we can't see, that causes all the problems and the mess on the roads. Now, these are probably signs you see a lot as you make your way closer to bridges and overpasses. That's something that we caution you about when we start to talk about the potential for winter weather here. The bridges, ice before roads, well, this is why. So our typical roads that you see as you're traveling around North Georgia that have the nice medians and the grass or the trees on either side, well, that
insulates the roadways. So that doesn't allow the temperatures on roads that have land on either side and no overpass or any kind of empty space underneath them. That allows them to stay insulated and nice and warm. The temperatures don't drop on those roads quite as quickly. However, when you're talking an overpass, you can have that cold air go both over and underneath, so surround those bridges and overpasses, and that allows temperatures on overpasses to drop quicker. So as precipitation falls, as any kind of winter weather falls, the bridges are always the first places that we have to be very careful on because they will ice over before your typical roadways. Those bridges and overpasses definitely something you need to be very careful on as we head into this upcoming winter season. Now, of course, we have the Georgia Department of Transportation that works feverishly when we talk about the threat of winter weather, and what they use is salt. You've probably seen them around, those salt trucks that put that salt compound onto the roads if we have the potential for any kind of winter weather here in North Georgia. Well, the reason that they add the salt compound is because when you add salt to the roads, the freezing point of water increases by about 15 degrees. So instead of water freezing at 32 degrees, we're talking about that freezing point more so being in the teens. So the temperatures have to be a lot colder for snow to stick on the roads when they put that salt compound on there. So I know that they will be ready and on standby when we let them know that there's the threat for winter weather to keep you as safe as possible as you are traveling around this winter season.
We've already heard that El Nino may be a driving factor on this winter's weather, but last year we had a La Nina, which brought a wacky winter to North Georgia. Meteorological winter starts on December 1st, and last winter got off to a rather toasty start. In fact, a record high temperature of 78 degrees was observed at Hartsfield-Jackson on December 8th. As the month went on, the weather turned gradually colder before a major Arctic outbreak arrived just ahead of Santa on December 23rd. It was one of the worst nationwide outbreaks of December cold air in decades, and the temperature nosedived from the 50s to the teens in North Georgia in a matter of hours. Athens broke a record low temperature on the 23rd when the mercury dipped to 11 degrees, shattering the old record of 13 degrees set in 1989. Did you know the weather records in Athens date back 120 years? It was even colder the next morning, when the low temperature in Athens and in Atlanta was a frigid 8 degrees. It was enough to tie another record in Athens, and it was the coldest December weather in Atlanta since 1989. Santa loved the cold air for Christmas, but many of us did not, as a slight thaw in the afternoon, and especially on the 26th, led to a lot of bursting pipes in our area. The warm-up continued, and by New Year's Eve, the temperature was back to 15 degrees above normal. It was a sign of things to come for the rest of the winter. January is normally the coldest month of the year in Georgia, but it was not cold or snow that caused issues last winter. It was severe weather. A dozen tornadoes tore through north and central Georgia during the afternoon of January 12th, and these weren't quick spin-ups either. There were several EF2 tornadoes and an EF1 in Cobb County. But the big one peaked as an EF3 while on the ground for more than 30 miles from Pike to Henry County. It was an EF3 with 150-mile-per-hour winds in Spalding County, tearing through Griffin and destroying buildings in its path. An unseasonably warm January was followed by an even warmer February, and the severe storm threat continued. Another round of thunderstorms brought a tornado to LaGrange in mid-February. The temperature in February was a whopping 8.5 degrees warmer than normal in Atlanta, the second warmest February on record. It even featured 2 record highs in the low 80s. And after that brutal cold snap near Christmas, the temperature did not fall below 29 degrees in Atlanta for the rest of the winter. And the snow total in Atlanta for the entire month was a whopping 1/10 of an inch. So there you have it. Aside from one cold snap, last winter was super warm. And all signs point to this winter being chillier with more storms than last year. Chillier plus more storms could mean snow in these parts.
So El Nino and La Nina are terms that you hear a lot, especially when we're talking about your hurricane forecast and your winter weather forecast. So to explain it, I'm going to take you all the way down to the Pacific Ocean. El Nino and La Nina, the process happens in the Pacific, but as you know, it impacts our weather here in North Georgia. So this is a normal pattern. We have warm air that's around the equator, and we have what's called a trade wind that literally takes that warm air and it moves it west away from North America and toward Asia. When that happens, cold air comes in from the bottom of the ocean and replaces that warmer air. It's a process we call upwelling. So that's our normal pattern in the Pacific. During a La Nina, these winds, the trade winds, are a lot faster, so they blow that warmer air further away, which allows more cold air to build in around the Pacific. And as a result, that cold air pushes our jet stream further north here in the United States. And as you recall, the jet stream is super important for us here because that's basically our storm track in the wintertime, bringing one storm system after another across the U.S. So when that jet stream is further north, unfortunately, that means it's typically drier in the south, including us here in North Georgia. So El Nino is basically that process in reverse. During an El Nino, the wind is a lot weaker around the equator. So instead of that cold air being there, it allows the warmer air to build up. And that warm air does something interesting. There's a lot of thunderstorms around that warmer air, and that triggers a second jet stream. We call it the subtropical jet, and that's usually situated in the southern portions of the United States. So during an El Nino, which we are in right now, that typically means a more active pattern for us here in the south, including North Georgia. And we are forecasting that El Nino to continue through the wintertime. And First Alert meteorologist Ella Dorsey will explain exactly what more active means for us in North Georgia.
In order to predict what's going to happen this winter, we have to explain what happens usually in the United States during El Nino winters. The south is usually wetter than average, and the southeast is usually colder than average. Now, I went and looked at years that are very similar to this year. We came out of a strong La Nina at the beginning of the year, and we're now entering into a strong El Nino. So I looked back at the last 100 years and found that 2009, 2010 had a very similar pattern. I then looked at Georgia in 2009 and 2010, and this is what I found. It was very cold. On average, December through January and February, we were 7 degrees below average, with the average temperature being 40.1 degrees. In January, 8 mornings were in the teens, which is extremely abnormal. It was also very wet. On Christmas 2009, almost 2 inches of rain fell, and we got about a fourth of our yearly rain in just December of that year. It was also very snowy. We recorded 13 snowfall events at the airport, making it the 3rd snowiest winter in the last 50 years, and we even got snow in March. So we've had very mild winters for the last several years. All signs are pointing to the fact that this winter could be a cold one.
A holiday deep freeze at the end of 2022 gave way to a balmy January in North Georgia. While the warmer temperatures were appreciated by many, the severe weather that accompanied them was not. A dozen tornadoes tore through North and Middle Georgia on January 12th. It was all part of a wet and mild month that saw the temperature soar to nearly 7 degrees above normal, with over 1.5 times the normal precipitation. The warm weather rolled into February, and it became even more extreme as record highs in the low 80s were set on 2 days during the month. It's in the books as the 2nd warmest February on record in Atlanta. Once March and spring rolled around, the temperature trended back to near normal, and eventually we saw some cooler than normal weather in May. We also saw a big explosion of pollen in early March, sooner than normal because of the very warm weather in January and February. The 2 coldest months this year, relative to normal of course, were May and June. Both were about 1 degree below normal. The back half of the summer, though, was hot, with July, August, and September all warmer than normal. The temperature in Atlanta has reached at least 90 degrees on 65 days in 2023. That's nearly 20 days above the 30-year average and the highest total since the record-setting year back in 2019. The second half of 2023 hasn't just been characterized by warm weather, it has also been very dry. There were localized heavy thunderstorms this summer, one of which we heard about earlier in the show, but more often than not, the weather has been dry since July. From July 1st to November 1st, Atlanta got just 62% of the normal rain, and the deficit was even greater in northwest Georgia. The drought is extreme and exceptional in the northern part of the state. There has not been an extreme drought in North Georgia in the past 4 years, and it's been 7 years since we've seen an exceptional drought in this state. The global weather pattern is shifting, and as we're about to find out, relief from the dry conditions could be on the way sooner rather than later.